Hello and welcome, or welcome back to Read Becca. I want to do some reflecting today on my 2022 to be read shelf. I've already posted up my 2023 TBR shelf, and so you can see what books remained on there and came off. So only the books that I did actually read, which was about half of them, were pulled off of my shelf. And so I like to reflect on those by thinking about whether I want them to stay in my collection or leave my collection. I don't traditionally do hauls because I have a lot of turnover in my bookshelves. I read a book, and if it's not a new favorite, it's usually going to leave my collection for, selling to a secondhand shop or to a little free library, that sort of thing. So this is kind of my version of an unhaul and a reflection on whether I enjoyed the books I read from my physical TBR shelf. Did I pick the right books? So we've got a mix here for sure. So let's go through the books that I read from my TBR shelf. The first book that I read from my physical TBR shelf last year is Midnight at the Bright Ideas Bookstore by Matthew Sullivan. And this is, I'm not going to give a huge synopsis for all of these, it will take all day, but this is kind of a very bookish book. It's set at a bookstore, obviously, and following a character. She works at the bookstore, and she finds a patron's body in the upstairs at the bookstore. And so she is set on this mystery, uncovering what happened, the background of this individual who was kind of a quirky, slightly mentally unhinged, maybe homeless character who has died, and uncovering a bit about his life. And there are actual code type elements, so you can see there's some odd text here. So she's really pulling the thread of what has gone on with this and going down a path of uncovering his life. And I really enjoyed this. I think this was a fun, cozy, and harrowing read. It's got a lot of really dark elements, but I don't think I would ever read it again. So I enjoyed my time with it, but I do think this one is going to be leaving my collection. The second book that I read from my TBR was The #1 Ladies Detective Agency by Alexandra McCall Smith. And this is set in Africa. It's following a woman who starts the first ladies detective agency in her village. And we're following these sort of anecdotes. And it's very quirky, and it's got a good sense of humor. There's some very dark content in here, obvious murders. And I enjoyed this quite a bit. I don't think it was a new favorite though. So if this were a standalone, it probably would be leaving my collection. But I do want to continue on with the series. So I think I'm going to continue on with the series from my library and not purchase the books. It could become a new favorite though. So I think I'm going to hang on to this book in case I really buy into the series later on. But if I don't within a couple of books, I'm probably going to get rid of this and just continue reading from the library and not worry about having it on my shelf. So I think that's my feelings on #1 Ladies Detective Agency. The third book that I read is The Storied Life of A.J. Fikry by Gabrielle Zevin. I unfortunately DNF'd this. I really hated it. It's kind of a knockoff of Silas Marner or A Simple Twist of Fate. This curmudgeonly guy gets a baby and completely changes his life. First of all, I don't really buy into the idea of a bad person getting a child and changing and becoming better. I think you should probably do the work before you get a child. So that on its own was, I was not in for it. I also had massive problems with the kind of handling of this life of a child, right? Where he's not just a curmudgeonly person. He's extremely mentally and emotionally unhealthy and alcoholic at the point that he gets this child. So at no point do the people around him kind of go, hey, who are definitely aware of his state. They never go, hey, red flag, like we should protect this child and it should not be in his care. Like that seemed very irresponsible from a storytelling perspective to me. And then the final straw that broke my back to giving up on this was really that the child is not a fully formed being. It's a prop to fix him, but not fix him as a person. It fixes him so that he's dateable. And that was it for me. Like, okay, he's better, but he's really better for the purpose of building a romantic relationship in this story. And I was not behind that. So I think all of that is more than enough, but beyond that, there's a ton of literary snobbery in here. He runs a bookstore, and the relationship that we're seeing is between him and this woman who he really looks down on for selling books. She works for some publisher and sells books that are, commercial fiction, and he thinks it's trash. So yeah, I just really didn't like that aspect of the character. The whole back and forth between them about books was really difficult for me to take as someone who reads and loves books of all kinds, and I really dislike elitism and gatekeeping in the bookish world. So yeah, sorry to talk about this one so much, but this was one that is definitely leaving my collection, and I'm sure someone will be happy to have it. It's in great condition, and it's a very popular book, so I think it will be well loved elsewhere. Book number 4 is The Silent Companions by Laura Purcell. This is very much on my shelf because I was trying to read a project of modern ladies writing Gothic vibes, and this is that. This is very much in a historical setting. There are kind of 2 timelines, and it's a creepy manor house, very atmospheric and setting focused, not a ton of plot. I think I enjoyed this more than I would have on my own because I was buddy reading this with Amy from BookTube with Amy. She helped me catch some things that really enhanced the reading experience. But I think this was my least favorite of the Gothic books that I've picked up, and I had some major problems with the choices about the ending and kind of the villain of the story. So I did have some major problems with it. I think I want to hang on to it while I'm doing this sort of project of collecting these Gothic books. I don't think it's going to stay in my collection though long term, because it's one that wasn't super memorable compared to the others. So we will get to some of the others later on in this. This was the least memorable. Number 5 is Time Cat by Lloyd Alexander. Lloyd Alexander is very well known for The Black Cauldron, and this was not super memorable. This is a children's novel following a cat character who can travel through time. And I enjoyed this, I think, actually more than I expected to. There was a lot more depth and sense of place to the different times they jump to. He and his boy that is caring for him jump back to, ancient Egypt, for example, and they see different times when cats have been integral to humans. And that was such a fun story. So it wasn't a new favorite, but I think I have to keep it because it's Time Cat. Like, it's one I just sort of want to have on my shelves. So I think that's going to be it for this one. Book number 6 is First Person by Richard Flanagan. So in this story, we're following this character who is a writer that has never published a book, and somehow he gets the deal of the century in being commissioned to ghostwrite this memoir for a famed con man. And I really hated it. The premise sounded great. I kept reading. I did finish this book. I didn't DNF it because I kept thinking it's satirizing all of this stuff that it's incorporating here with immense literary snobbery. I would say that's there. Toxic masculinity is really heavy. And at the end, I realized it was taking that all seriously. So I really didn't like it. Didn't like, the characters were just really repulsive. And it took itself too seriously when I thought, oh yes, we're right on the cusp of jumping off into over-the-top ridiculousness, and it was just taking itself seriously the whole time with this really, really terrible stuff. So yeah, this one is definitely leaving my collection. The 7th book that I read is Save Me the Plums by Ruth Reichel. So Ruth Reichel is a food writer and critic. She is writing here her memoir specifically of her time at Gourmet magazine. And so we are seeing her time there through these major happenings in not just the food world, but the actual world, where effectively, in New York, where they were located, they go through 9/11. We see her hit the kind of crash of 2008 economically that really impacted food magazines as well as all magazines, and the eventual ending with the shutdown of the magazine. And so she is taking us through not just the food elements, but her life and what was going on in the world. And I love the way that was woven together. So this is incredibly masterfully written. I don't know if this was a new favorite. It definitely made me want to pick up more of Rachel's work. She has some other books, but I don't think I need to keep it on my shelf. I really don't think I would ever reread this. It's kind of one of those memoirs that it's very much one and done. Once you've read it, there's not a ton to go back into. But her writing is so beautiful. She really writes vividly about food, especially, but also travel. So yeah, this one's kind of going to be in the maybe pile, but most likely it's going. Number 8 is Pillars of the Earth by Ken Follett. A big chunky book that I read this year. This is massive saga about the building of a cathedral following multiple generations. It's very difficult reading and harrowing reading. Many perspectives. It's very expansive. So it's a lot. I did not love all the characters, but I respect the writing of this. The fact that it's so expansive and it manages to get a good amount of realism. Like the characterization is very good. The setting, the place, the history is very, very good. So I didn't actually love this, but it was still a 5-star read. It's such an immense accomplishment of a book that I do want to hang on to it, and I do intend to continue the series. Could I see myself rereading this particular one? No, probably not. I do want to read more from Follett to see, if it was just this story that I had kind of some problems with the characters, especially, to see if he has maybe something more palatable for me. But I think this was immense. This was an incredible work. Book number 9 is Vita Nostra by Sergei and Marina Dyachenko. And this is a definite keep. I don't know even what to say about this. This is really strange, dark academia fantasy. So we're following this young girl as she gets sort of recruited for this weird school by a guy threatening her. If she doesn't perform these actions, something bad is going to happen. And so she just starts doing it. And then that eventually turns into her going to this magical school, cutting off kind of ties with the rest of her life. And it's weird. It's really weird. It's hard to talk about because it's so strange and unusual. And it just has this immense sense of atmosphere to it and dread about everything that's going on. You never get the full picture of how the magic works or what's even going on at the school, but it's just so immersive and really draws you in. So that one is definitely staying in my collection, and I think actually a follow-up to this is finally coming out after many years. So looking forward to that. I think that's this year. And number 10 is My Life in France by Julia Child and Alex Prudhomme. This is Julia Child's memoir about her time in France, about going there and basically not even liking cooking and then deciding to sort of learn and really getting into food. This is an all-time favorite for me, I think, now, and it's definitely staying in my collection. She has such a vivid sense of storytelling about the place and the food. She has an exuberance for life, I think, and if you've ever seen any video of her, you can really tell, and that comes across in this collection of stories about her life there. So absolutely keeping this one. The 11th book that I read is Mr. Penumbra's 24-Hour Bookstore by Robin Sloan. This is such a whimsical book. It's very bookish, so it's obviously about a bookstore, but it's about this down-and-out clerk who winds up working at a bookstore, and this bookstore has a secret. So we're pulled into this world of secret societies, and there is a clash between the old world of books and technological advances and his passion for e-reading. That sort of thing is really incorporated well into this. So yeah, this is not a new favorite maybe, but I actually could see myself rereading this. I absolutely loved Sourdough, and I think I like that one better than this book, but I just enjoyed it so much. So this is definitely staying in my collection. The 12th book that I read is Not Fade Away by Rebecca Alexander, and this is a memoir of senses lost and found. So this is obviously her memoir, talking about the fact that she has Usher syndrome, and so her vision and hearing are rapidly degrading, and she will be blind and deaf. And it does talk about the aspects of dealing with that, dealing with processing that. But this is much more a normal memoir. It's kind of talking about her day-to-day life and her trying to find relationships and stuff like that. So I don't feel like Rue is coming to assist. I don't feel like I got as much out of it as I really hoped for. I enjoyed the experience of having read it. I'm not going to knock it as a bad memoir. It just didn't seem as memorable as I had hoped for. And so I'm glad I read it, but it's going to leave my collection, I think. The 13th book that I read is Bellman Black by Diane Setterfield. This is from the Gothic Project, and it definitely accomplishes that vibe very successfully. So we're talking historical England, very like foggy, dark, and the Gothic execution here is is there maybe something weird going on or maybe not? It's in that unsolid place that most Gothic has. It is following Mr. Bellman, or he starts as a boy. As a boy, he gains a passion for a family mill business, millinery and textiles, that sort of thing. And specifically like dyes. He's really into dye, but he's not the son and heir. However, his passion leads him to kind of increasingly take more and more responsibility in the business because the heir doesn't actually really want to work in the business. And so through his passion, he's running this successful business. So we see a lot of running a business. And then it turns into, through some eerie happenings, him seeing the potential of the funeral business, which has not existed before. So he is sort of founding this whole movement of funerals being something where he could sell funeral clothes and make it a one-stop shop, basically. So that is the Bellman Black, as he's starting this funeral business. And there is a certain air and atmosphere of creepiness. It definitely has strong Victorian Gothic vibes with a plague going on, where very commonly in Victorian Gothic, you get the plague. So I really enjoyed this. I think Setterfield is on the path to becoming a new favorite author. Her writing is so gorgeous, rich, lush. She really gives you a sense of place, and the characterization is incredibly good. So I have read both this book and Once Upon a River, and I have 13th Tale on my shelves, and I really need to get to it because I have loved the previous two. So I definitely will be hanging on to this because I loved it. The 14th book that I read is The Essex Serpent by Sarah Perry, and I don't know how much I have more to say than what I just said about the previous book. This is also set in historical England. It's also a Gothic, and for that project, this has a wonderful sense of place. It really is grounded next to the Thames, and this Essex Serpent is a kind of mythic or superstitious figure for this community, where they kind of put their fears onto this Essex Serpent of, again, plague. Is this serpent causing plague or deaths when someone loses a child? Is it because the serpent was there? That sort of thing. And so it really has that rich sense of atmosphere to it that accomplishes the Gothic. And for this one, it's another that has, is it real? Is it not real? Sort of vibe to it that is common in Gothic. And I think Sarah Perry is definitely someone who is newly on my watch list of authors I really want to pick up more from. This has a vast cast, and they feel very grounded and well executed as characters, very unique people through making up this community. So definitely staying on my physical shelves. The 15th book was BINTI, The Night Masquerade by Nnedi Okorafor. This is kind of an Afrofuturist sci-fi with a little magic to it, very, very mixed spec fic, following a girl, BINTI, who is coming from, it seems, a future Africa, and is the first to go to a university in space. But through this book and the previous book, a large part of it takes place back on Earth. Conflicts between different communities there, conflicts between the alien communities that she's interacted with. And so we are very much seeing the elements of individual cultures and culture clash. And colonialism definitely comes up here, I think. So I really enjoyed this. I think this was my least favorite of the trilogy, but I did really enjoy the trilogy and do want to have it. I have the third and the first novella. These are little novella trilogy. But I have them in different editions. So I do think I'm gonna be on the lookout to collect the trilogy in one edition or the other. So I'm gonna keep this on my shelf with the intent to unhaul one or the other book once I find a complete trilogy set. So yeah, so that one is staying. Then we have number 16 is The Warden by Anthony Trollope. This is a very well-loved historical story, classic, where we're following a warden of the church who cares for these elderly men, and he is potentially being challenged in his position due to some monetary concerns. So I feel very mixed about this one because like half of the book was a total 5-star for me. The other half of the book I didn't really need or didn't really get because it is so much a satire of very specific things at the time. So the newspaper, like very, very specific things that were going on in the church. And so I didn't get along with those things as well. So I think I'm going to hold on to this. I definitely want to continue on with the series. I've already picked up the second book. So I'm going to keep this on my shelves because I do think this could turn into a favorite series past this book once it's not having those really like you had to be there to understand moments taking up so much of the book. But I definitely enjoyed the reading experience immensely with this one. The 17th book that I read is Queens of Innis, Lear by Tessa Gratton. This is a Shakespearean retelling of King Lear, but from mainly the three daughters' perspective. It's big, expansive fantasy, and we're following those three daughters. We've got a number of other characters. There's nature magic. There's a star priest. So reading the stars is a very major element of the culture of this island where they're all located, and we are kind of beginning with the clash between Lear as he's kind of losing it. That's very much the story of King Lear, and the daughters going out their own ways. They're all adults, especially the youngest daughter, who is a star priestess. She's having to leave and be exiled for not declaring her loyalty and love to her father, because she finds it kind of ridiculous. She says, "Of course I love you. Why do you need me to say it in public in this way?" And so it's really character focused, but it also has this lush prose, very heavy nature writing vibes to this. So I love the writing to this. The story is a little slow paced and it's very long. So I think this was a gorgeous book. It's probably not a new favorite, but I enjoyed it so much. I definitely do want to pick up some more Tessa Gratton. And so I think this is a high maybe to staying on my shelves. I do think I probably want to hang on to this because this is a fairly uncommon book. I'm not going to run into it in the wild, I don't think. Yeah, but it's so beautifully written. So I do think this is probably going to stay. The 18th thing I read is Things in Jars by Jess Kidd. This is another from the Gothic Project. And this, again, delivers on that atmosphere and vibe. It's set again beside the Thames and has a strong sense of community. So I think it definitely pulled in all of the things that the other books had that I've mentioned already for the Gothic project, but this one really pushed it even further. So I enjoyed this one the most because we are following this woman who, in two timelines, she is in the present this investigator, like a private investigator type role, and she's investigating the disappearance or kidnapping of a girl who had been kept secret her whole life for reasons. And then we're also seeing her backstory, the woman's backstory, as she had this very unusual upbringing to get into forensics and investigation. Like, she's so headstrong. And so we're seeing from both sides this really unusual story, but it's incorporating all of these gruesome elements with kind of some dark things in her past, and some dark elements, I think, in the present with abuse. There's actual abuse on the page, and some gruesome stuff with animals, that sort of thing. And we're also seeing the gruesome things of the time, the bloody operating theaters that were going on. So surgery was very new and not a lot of anesthetic and that sort of thing. That is all incorporated so well and historically, but it really pushes it. We also have actually unreal things, like definitely, for sure, there's a prominent ghost character in here, and the banter, like, we meet him very early in the book, so not a spoiler. The banter between them, because she can see the ghost, she's the only one who sees the ghost, is great. They just have this dynamic duo, kind of. But then there are also actually really sort of creepy, scary, non-real things to this. Oddities and a carnival, all of the historical things that you could think of to mash together into this sort of creepy story. So I just loved it. This was phenomenal. It's definitely staying on my shelves, and I will be picking up more from Jess Kidd. 19th, I read Biblical Literalism, a Gentile Heresy by John Shelby Spong, and this is very, very niche, but I loved it. It is my niche. So this is really tackling biblical literalism and why, for Jesus, for the disciples, for the writers of the Gospels, that would not have been contextually appropriate. So he spends this chunky book breaking down the Gospels especially, and talking through how they follow the Jewish liturgical calendar, and it makes sense to think of them as being directly tied to kind of the bullet points that the liturgy in Judaism would have followed. So these are effectively kind of sermons that would be told following a certain set schedule. And so he does a very convincing and good job of that. And again, it was very much my niche, so this is definitely staying on my shelves. And finally, or sort of finally, we have The Three Musketeers by Alexandre Dumas. I don't think I need to introduce this. This is a classic. It's a massively influential work about the Three Musketeers and their adventures. And I didn't love it. It's not a new favorite. I kind of do want to have a copy on my shelves because it's such an influential work, and, you know, I would like to have it there and be able to reference it for things, but I don't, this is a very beat up copy, obviously, so I don't think I want this copy. I will try to keep my eye out for a nicer copy that I can get very cheaply secondhand, but not in any hurry, I don't think. So yeah, that's The Three Musketeers. It was okay. And then we have one that's sort of in limbo. So this is the real last book of the video, is World War Z. This was on my TBR shelf for 2022, and I started it at the very end of 2022. I did not finish it, however, and I also decided I was not going to carry it over onto the 2023 TBR shelf, even though I could have given myself a quick win to get the count up to 1 finished from the TBR. I didn't want to do that. I wanted to give myself more options, not have this sitting read on the shelf all year from the first couple days. So I did finish this. I did enjoy it very much. This is the story of a zombie outbreak, and told through a mixed media perspective of interviews. yeah, I enjoyed everything about it. I could see myself rereading this in print because I did audio with a little bit of print and audio, and there were some significant differences that I caught there. So I could see myself rereading it, so it's going to stay on my shelves. That is what I read from my physical TBR shelf in 2022. I think we had a great mix of new favorites and stuff I really didn't like. I think it may be controversial, some of those, so let me know what you agree or disagree with, maybe strongly. But as always, thank you so much for watching BookTube.